They said giants were myths until bones, photos, and ancient ruins started proving otherwise. What if they were real all along? When European explorers reached South America's southern edge, they didn't just find unfamiliar landscapes, they claimed they saw giants. Real ones. Ferdinand Magellan's crew in the 1520s reported encounters with native people who were nearly twice their height. One giant even boarded their ship but died mysteriously before reaching Europe. No body, no further proof, just silence. The name Patagonia may stem from Patagon, a reference to a fictional giant. That made some dismiss the reports as exaggeration, but similar sightings continued for centuries. Sir Francis Drake's crew described towering natives. Dutch explorers sketched huge men beside ships. Even Captain Fitzroy, traveling with Darwin, noted unusually tall tribes. These weren't just tall people, they were strong, broad, and capable of feats like lifting massive stones. Artifacts and sketches from that time still exist. Some are kept in museums labeled clearly, Giant Tribes of Patagonia. Modern genetic studies show unique markers in the region's indigenous people. Some experts suggest a link to Dennisovvens, an ancient human cousin known for large bones. Others believe the size could be from an isolated, long-lost lineage. In the early 1900s, skeletons over 7 feet tall were reportedly uncovered in Argentina, then vanished. Some say they were taken by major institutions and hidden. No confirmation, no denial. Were these giants real? Could a few have survived deep in Patagonia's remote wilderness? The records are there, the drawings are real, and so is the possibility that these giants weren't myths, but history. In the thick jungles of southern Ecuador, near the province of Loja, a mystery emerged that few have explained away. In the 1960s, a local priest and a team of scientists stumbled upon an unusual burial site. Inside, they uncovered skeletons, tall ones, not your typical 5 or 6 feet. These remains stood over 7 feet in life, with broad shoulders, massive skulls, and strange proportions that set them apart from the local populations. The find was documented. Photos were taken. Several skeletons were allegedly moved to private collections or institutions for research, but most of them vanished from public view. The original discovery site? Overgrown, unmarked. Locals say government officials visited soon after the find, then the place went quiet. Now here's the twist, this wasn't the only time. Multiple sites in Ecuador have yielded giant bones over the years, and not just bones, massive tools, ceremonial objects, and stone structures that don't align with typical Inca or pre-Inca architecture. It's as if an entirely different kind of human civilization once thrived there. Taller, stronger, and now almost entirely erased. Some researchers have connected these finds to a tribe mentioned in local legends, Los Gigantes, being said to have lived before the Great Flood, wiped out when the earth could no longer support their size. Strangely enough, several of these skeletons were reportedly dated to before 10,000 years ago, well before most known South American civilizations. Could this be a forgotten chapter in human history? Or are we glimpsing a branch of humanity the textbooks never included? Whatever the answer, one thing's certain: the soil in Ecuador has stories to tell, and some of them walk tall. Deep in the desert of Nevada, a dusty cave hides a legend that's anything but ordinary. For generations, the Paiute people spoke of a race of red-haired giants, violent beings who once lived in the region. They were said to be massive, strong, and cannibalistic, eventually driven into a cave and burned alive by native tribes. Sounds like mythology, until bones were found. In 1911, miners extracting bat guano from Lovelock Cave stumbled upon human remains. Among them, skulls with red hair, bones far larger than normal, and giant sandals measuring over 15 inches long. Archaeologists were brought in. Some artifacts went to museums. But as often happens in stories like this, the largest and most unusual remains quietly disappeared. What's left today? Over 10,000 artifacts were recovered. Baskets, tools, even duck decoys. But the skeletons? Officially, most were lost or reburied. Yet early photographs exist, showing abnormally large skulls and femurs. Some researchers, both amateur and academic, still claim to have seen bones over 7 feet in length. Skeptics point to conditions in the cave that could mummify remains or distort size. But how do you explain the consistency with the Paiute legends? Why were the skulls red-haired when the surrounding tribes had dark hair? Genetic anomaly or the remnants of a different people? Some believe the Lovelock giants may be linked to an ancient seafaring group, or even to the Dennisovvens, who were known to be large-boned. Others think the story is being buried on purpose, piece by piece, but the cave is still there, and despite countless denials, whispers continue. Could it really have been the last stand of a forgotten race? A place where myth and reality overlapped before being sealed in stone? In 1890, one of Japan's earliest experimental films caused a stir by showing what appeared to be a giant man towering over villagers. At the time, it was quickly dismissed as a clever trick, an early example of cinematic illusion using forced perspective. Historians later confirmed the film was staged, but over a century later, a real photograph began circulating that reignited the legend. In it, a massive sumo-like man casually walks through a crowd of people in what appears to be post-war Japan. Unlike the staged 1890 footage, this image feels unsettlingly candid. The people around him don't appear to be reacting to a performance. They're calm, composed, even familiar. Could this be photographic proof that the old giant hoax was actually hiding something real all along? Some researchers believe this photo may have captured one of the last known appearances of a true genetic giant, someone whose existence was quietly erased from public record. Some things are so strange that you'd think they were made for a horror movie. But the Cap d'Oie mummy isn't part of a film, it's an actual exhibit. Standing at 12 feet tall with 2 heads and a twisted legend, this preserved giant has been on display in various oddity museums for over a century. And no matter how many skeptics try to explain it away, no one can fully debunk it. According to the story, Cap d'Oie was a 2-headed giant captured by Spanish sailors in the 1600s. After allegedly trying to escape, he was killed and mummified. His massive, double-skulled body passed through collectors until it ended up in Baltimore, where it still stands behind glass. Now, here's the catch: experts have examined it. Some say it's a hoax stitched together from 2 corpses. Others argue the spine and skeletal features appear too seamless to be faked with old methods. There's no proven documentation of its origin, but also no proof that it was fabricated in modern times either. Is it a rare case of conjoined gigantism? A preserved relic from a forgotten species? Or something even stranger? Whatever the truth, the Cap d'Oie mummy isn't just a curiosity. It's a challenge to everything we think we know about human anatomy and history, and it's still staring back at us. In Balbeck, Lebanon, there are stones that seem to defy physics. At the Temple of Jupiter, 3 massive stones, known as the Trilithon, weigh up to 800 tons each. Just to put that into perspective, that's heavier than a fully loaded 747. And they weren't just carved. They were lifted and precisely placed on top of each other. Over 2,000 years ago. Even stranger is a nearby quarry where an even bigger stone lies abandoned, the stone of the pregnant woman, estimated at over 1,000 tons. No modern crane could move it without major effort. So who moved the others? How? Mainstream archaeology says Roman engineers did it, using pulleys and manpower. But nothing like this scale has ever been replicated, not even with modern technology. Ancient alien theories aside, some believe that a race of giants, mentioned in early Mesopotamian and Levantine texts, could have been behind it. The size and strength needed to build Balbeck would match the abilities described in those ancient accounts. The stones remain in place, the temple still stands, and no clear answer exists as to how it was built, or by whom. In 1890, in the town of Castelnau-le-Lay, France, a professor named Georges Vacher de la Puge uncovered fragments of a human skull, femur, and tibia. But these weren't normal bones. They were massive. Based on his analysis, the man would have stood over 11 feet tall. These remains weren't just large, they were human, according to anatomical standards of the time. The skull fragment alone was nearly 3 times the average thickness and size of a normal human skull. Lapuge's findings were published in scientific journals, but soon forgotten or dismissed as errors. The bones mysteriously vanished from public record. No museum holds them today. No replicas, just illustrations and descriptions in century-old papers. And yet, the discovery was documented by multiple professionals at the time, making it hard to write off entirely. Some believe the remains were buried, figuratively, because they didn't fit the accepted narrative of human history. Others think the skeleton may have belonged to a human with an extreme form of gigantism, but no other similar remains have surfaced from that exact era or location. What's more likely, an ancient mistake or a truth that was too big to accept? The Bible doesn't just mention giants, it names them. Goliath, slain by David, is described as over 9 feet tall, wearing armor that would crush most men. But he wasn't the only one. Og of Bashan ruled over a kingdom, and his bed is said to have been over 13 feet long. Then there are the Nephilim, mysterious beings of old, men of renown. believed by many to be the offspring of divine beings and human women. These stories appear not just in religious texts, but in the Book of Enoch and other ancient writings. They describe beings that were taller, stronger, and feared across lands. Some were said to have survived the Great Flood, continuing their lineage in secret places. Skeptics call them metaphors. But here's where it gets interesting. Archaeological finds around the Middle East have included oversized bones, weapons, and sandals far beyond human scale. Some of these artifacts have quietly disappeared into storage or are dismissed without detailed study. Even in modern genetics, there are unexplained DNA segments in some populations, especially around the Levant, that don't trace to Neanderthals or Homo sapiens. Could that be a remnant of something more? Whether you read the Bible or not, the consistency of these tales across cultures and continents makes one thing clear. The idea of giants wasn't just a single civilization's fantasy. It might be a collective memory of something we were never meant to forget. So, picture this, a cave deep in Siberia and scientists stumble upon a tooth. But not just any tooth, a molar that honestly didn't fit any known species. It was way too big, too thick, and yeah, way too ancient. At first, the team thought it must have come from a cave bear, but DNA had other plans that actually belonged to a human relative we call the Dennisovvens. And this molar, it was gigantic. Now, Dennisovvens are still mostly a mystery to us. We only know them through a handful of bones and teeth, but what we do have suggests they were physically, well, way more robust than any modern human. One molar found in the Denisova cave was so huge that, honestly, it couldn't have belonged to anyone alive today. Then another was found in Laos, which confirmed these beings weren't just hanging out in Siberia. They roamed deep into Southeast Asia too. So what made them so large? Some researchers think they were adapted for colder climates or maybe higher altitudes. Others believe we're missing a massive piece of human evolution, literally. And, some even suggest they were the real-life inspiration for ancient giant myths all across Asia. Denisovans interbred with Homo sapiens, and little fragments of their DNA still exist in some modern humans, especially in Melanesians and Tibetans. Could that explain why certain remote populations have, higher than average strength, lung capacity, or bone density? Well, what's clear is the Denisovan tooth didn't just challenge what we thought we knew about our ancestors. It really cracked open the door to a species that may have been enormous. Back in the 1980s, a Swiss entrepreneur named Gregor Spuri traveled to Egypt, chasing the usual mysteries pyramids, lost tombs, forbidden chambers, you know the drill. But what he found, or actually what he was shown, was way stranger than any tourist tale. In a dimly lit room, an elderly grave robber presented him with a mummified finger, and it was massive, over 15 inches long, dry, cracked, curled, and honestly, very human-looking. Spurry snapped a photo of the finger with a local currency note for scale, and wow, the result really shocked everyone who saw it. The finger was thick, with yellowed nails and skin folds that matched what you'd expect from age and decay. And if it had belonged to a proportional body, that person would have stood at least 16 feet tall. The finger was never handed over for lab testing, though. It vanished, right along with the man who owned it. Some people call it a hoax. Others say it's just another artifact the authorities wanted buried, literally. There's no official record of the relic, no museum display. But the photo remains, and it's been studied by anatomists who say, yeah, it actually looks disturbingly real. Could it have come from one of the Nephilim mentioned in ancient texts? Or maybe from a civilization whose remains have just been scrubbed from history? Until the finger resurfaces, it's just a photo. But honestly, it's a photo that refuses to be forgotten. Some landscapes just look, well, a little too perfect to be completely natural. All around the world, there are mountains and ridges that seem to resemble human figures lying in rest, sometimes peaceful, sometimes a bit ominous. Local legends call them sleeping giants, but a few folks believe they're more than just coincidences in rock. Take Mount Susitna in Alaska. People call it the Sleeping Lady. From the right angle, it totally looks like a woman lying on her back, arms folded. Then there's Nunu Mountain in Hawaii, a ridge that honestly looks just like the silhouette of a massive man. In Thailand, Doi Nang Non translates to Mountain of the Sleeping Woman, and locals have passed down stories for centuries claiming the figure was once alive. Now here's where things get a little eerie. In some of these places, ancient myths say the giant was turned to stone as punishment from the gods, or as protection from some kind of cataclysm. Sounds poetic, but what if there's a little geological truth hiding in those myths? Some researchers speculate that these giant shapes could be petrified remains, or maybe even remnants of structures built to look like giants by forgotten civilizations. And even stranger, several of these sleeping giants line up with powerful energy zones, magnetic anomalies, or ancient ritual sites. Coincidence, or did ancient people know something we've just forgotten? The Earth is old, we've barely scratched the surface. Maybe these mountains aren't just mountains, maybe they're watching, still frozen in place. Sleeping giants just waiting to wake. On the Mediterranean island of Sardinia, there's something strange hidden beneath the soil, and, it's not just ancient pottery or broken statues. It's giant bones. Lots of them. For years, locals have whispered about enormous skeletons unearthed during construction, only to be quickly removed, hushed up, or, buried again. Some even say they saw bones the length of a man's body, femurs thicker than tree trunks. And then there are the structures. Scattered across the island are tombs called Tombe dei Giganti, or giants' graves. These megalithic monuments, built by the Nuragic civilization over 3,000 years ago, are unlike anything else in Europe. Long, curved, and flanked with massive stone slabs, they resemble entrances for something far bigger than modern humans. Why would an ancient culture build tombs this size, unless they were meant for giants? Even stranger are the statues of Monte Prama stone warriors with large heads, broad shoulders, and piercing circular eyes. They don't just look powerful, they look massive. Some historians believe these statues represented real individuals, guardians, or kings, from a time when size and strength ruled. Sardinian farmers have quietly handed over bones to researchers, only to never see them again. Photos have surfaced showing enormous skulls and jawbones, none of which are displayed in any local museum. And every time a new construction project starts, someone reports bones being found and disappearing. Could Sardinia have been home to a race of giants? Did the Nuragic people bury their dead in oversized tombs for symbolic reasons or literal ones? The evidence keeps surfacing, but just as quickly it vanishes again. So, in the 1800s and early 1900s, American newspapers were honestly obsessed with one thing: giant skeletons. Headlines screamed about discoveries from coast to coast. Bones unearthed from ancient burial mounds that measured 8, 9, even 12 feet tall. Farmers, miners, and amateur archaeologists found them. Some even took photos, and almost every time the final line of the story was the same. The remains were sent to the Smithsonian for study. And then, nothing. Thousands of documented cases gone. No public records, no exhibits, just denial. Over the years, the Smithsonian has been accused of covering up these discoveries, hiding evidence that would challenge the established view of human history. They've never admitted to this. But they've never fully explained the disappearances either. Some insiders, anonymously, have claimed the skeletons were real and destroyed. Others say secret storerooms still hold what could rewrite everything we know about ancient America. Is it really so far-fetched? The Smithsonian is one of the most powerful institutions in the academic world. If a discovery threatened the accepted timeline, wouldn't there be pressure to erase it? The conspiracy gained traction when the Supreme Court was allegedly petitioned to force the Smithsonian to release documents from the early 20th century. Rumors swirled of crates marked giant skeletons not for display. Nothing came of it officially, but the whispers never stopped. Giant bones buried in Native American mounds, double rows of teeth, elongated skulls, massive jawbones. All documented, then sealed. The question isn't whether these skeletons existed. Enough people saw them. The question is, why don't we? In the rolling hills of County Antrim, Ireland, an incredible discovery was made in the 1890s and then quickly forgotten. Workers digging through a gravel pit uncovered something no one expected: a complete human skeleton measuring over 20 feet long. Not just a bone fragment, but a full figure laid out with a massive corroded bronze axe beside it. The find caused a stir. The press covered it, locals gathered, and then it disappeared. Eyewitnesses claimed the bones were in perfect proportion, unlike what you'd expect from someone with a growth disorder. The skull was enormous but human-shaped. The arms were long and thick. The axe was so large it would have taken superhuman strength to wield. Photographs were taken, and at least one was reportedly published in a local paper, though it's hard to find today. What happened next is where the story takes a turn. Officials from Dublin arrived, examined the site, packed the bones into crates, and that was it. No museum display, no follow-up, no trace. Theories exploded. Some believe the skeleton belonged to one of the legendary Fomorians, giant beings from Irish myth who were said to have ruled the island before humans. Others say it proves the ancient tales of warrior giants weren't allegory, they were memory. Skeptics insist it was a hoax or a misidentified animal skeleton. But why would trained officials show up to quietly remove something fake? And why did the axe match Bronze Age metallurgy but exceed all known weapon sizes from that era? The story faded, the pit was filled, and Ireland kept its secret under layers of soil and silence. Back in 1883, newspapers in West Virginia ran a headline that turned heads giant skeleton found in burial mound. According to reports, a group of amateur archaeologists exploring an ancient Native American mound uncovered a skeleton measuring 12 feet from skull to heel. It had broad shoulders, unusually thick bones, and here's the eerie part, double rows of teeth. The bones were said to be extremely well preserved. Even more shocking, the skeleton wasn't alone. It was one of several large remains found in the area during the late 19th century. These burial mounds weren't isolated. They were part of a wider system built by the Adena people, a pre-Columbian civilization known for their mound building. But were the Adena giants? Or did they bury giants? The Smithsonian was reportedly contacted and took possession of the bones. Sound familiar? Once again, there's no trace of them in public records, and yet too many articles and first-hand testimonies back the story up for it to be easily dismissed. Some researchers claim these large skeletons weren't human at all, at least not entirely. Legends passed down by local tribes speak of tall beings who ruled the region, who had strange features and unusual strength. Some accounts mention beings with red hair or elongated skulls, others speak of bones that turned to powder when exposed to air. Whatever the truth, West Virginia's mounds are real. You can still visit some today, but what was buried inside them might never see daylight again. Or maybe it already did, and someone made sure it didn't stay that way for long. Across continents and centuries, the trail of giants refuses to fade. From ancient bones to lost artifacts, from myths to forbidden photos, too many clues remain. Maybe giants truly did walk the earth. Maybe they still do. The question is no longer if, but where the truth is hiding. That's about it. So, which of these giant discoveries shocked you the most? Write in the comments, and don't forget to check out our other videos.